is not something that you read and you do it well. You have to have a natural feeling for it.
Have you ever wondered why someone as soulful, as universally loved as Marvin Gaye, the man whose voice could melt the hardest of hearts, harbored a quiet but undeniable list of artists he simply could not stand to work with? Imagine a voice that gave us timeless beauty in What's Going On, Sexual Healing, and Let's Get It On. Yet behind the curtain, that same voice carried a storm of resentment, frustration, and even defiance. What could drive a man like Marvin, gentle, spiritual, and deeply sensitive, to say no to some of the biggest names in music history? Because here's the secret. Behind the romantic ballads and legendary soul records, there existed 5 names Marvin Gaye never wanted near his art. 5 towering figures of Motown and beyond, giants of the music world. To the public, these were collaborations fans dreamed of, but to Marvin, they represented suffocation, betrayal, and the slow erosion of his creative soul. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about clashing egos in the shallow sense. This is about survival. An artist desperate to protect his authenticity in an industry that thrived on control. Tonight, we open that forbidden chapter, the one Marvin never sugarcoated. The 5 artists Marvin Gaye couldn't stand working with. The Empire and the Lock, Barry Gordy.
And it is not something that you read and you do it well. You have to have a natural feeling for it.
The first on Marvin's unspoken list wasn't just a fellow artist. It was the very architect of Motown itself, Barry Gordy. To the outside world, Gordy was the mastermind who built an empire, turning Motown into the heartbeat of Black America. But to Marvin, Gordy was both mentor and prison guard. "Don't overthink," Gordy once told him. "Just sing. Let the girls scream." On paper, it looked like encouragement. To Marvin, it was a chokehold. Words that locked him into a role he never asked for. The pretty face, the romantic crooner, the money-making machine. Every smile, every stage move, every outfit. Calculated, rehearsed, perfected. Marvin realized he wasn't singing anymore. He was performing a dream Gordy had written for him. But Marvin wanted more. By the late 1960s, America was in flames. Vietnam veterans returned broken, police violence escalated, and discrimination bled through every corner of society. Marvin's own brother came home from war with haunted eyes, and his beloved singing partner, Tammy Terrell, passed away too young. These wounds burned inside him, demanding to be sung. But when he brought Gordy early drafts of What's Going On, Gordy dismissed it coldly. "This isn't hit material. Nobody wants protest songs." Think about that. One of the most celebrated albums of all time, a masterpiece that reshaped soul music, was almost silenced. Gordy wanted light pop escapism. Marvin wanted to sing about war, injustice, and survival. And for daring to say no, Marvin paid the price. Their relationship cracked. Silent handshakes in public, but distance in private. Gordy never forgave him for breaking free, and Marvin never forgave Gordy for trying to silence him. Their clash wasn't just personal. It symbolized the larger war between marketable entertainment and raw, painful truth. The frozen duet, Diana Ross.
Somebody's hand make this world a better place.
Now let's step into a studio in Los Angeles, 1973. Imagine 2 of Motown's brightest stars, Marvin Gaye and Diana Ross, standing in the same room. Except they aren't. Between them is a soundproof glass wall, and more than that, an invisible wall of tension so thick it suffocates. Barry Gordy dreamed of pairing them in a duet album, Diana and Marvin. On paper, it looked like magic. In reality, it was chaos. Diana, perfectionist and disciplined to her core, demanded precision down to the breath. Marvin, especially after What's Going On, rejected all rules. He arrived late, sometimes not at all, and sang only when inspiration struck. He was raw. He was free. He was unpredictable. The clash was inevitable. Diana wanted control. Marvin wanted freedom. The sessions became so unbearable that they rarely recorded together. Diana would leave, Marvin would arrive later, and engineers would splice the recordings. What fans heard as duets were, in truth, two voices that never truly touched. The album sold well, the public adored it, but behind the curtain, it was hollow. Marvin once admitted, "I never felt I belonged in that room." Not because of Diana, but because of the expectations placed on us. And Diana? True to her nature, she never publicly addressed it. But listen closely to her vocals on that record. They sound polished, beautiful, but weary, as though carrying a burden she couldn't name. Sometimes two flames burn too brightly to share the same space. Marvin and Diana weren't enemies. They weren't friends. They were two worlds forced into the same mold and suffocated by it. The Battle of the Microphone. David Ruffin.
Leading the light of the moon in the springtime.
Not all conflicts were quiet. Some were as raw as a live performance. Picture this. Motown Review, 1966. Marvin Gaye takes the stage, voice smooth, controlled, pulling the audience into the palm of his hand. The crowd roars. He feels invincible. And then, without so much as a nod, David Ruffin of the Temptations storms in, grabs the mic, and belts Ain't Too Proud to Beg with a wild, uncontainable energy that drowns everything before it. Marvin never forgot that moment. He once told a friend, "I wasn't angry, just tired." Couldn't he just share the mic? David Ruffin was a force of nature, raw, passionate, untamed. Marvin was a perfectionist, disciplined, meticulous, in command of every note. On stage, they clashed like thunder and lightning. Audiences loved it. Backstage, it froze into silence. They smiled in public, but behind closed doors, neither would yield. At Motown, there was always an unspoken question. Who was the #1 male vocalist? Smokey Robinson had romance. Levi Stubbs had power. But Marvin and David? They were fire and fire, and only one could burn brightest. By the 1970s, their silent rivalry hardened. During one rehearsal, David arrived 2 hours late. Marvin, irritated, snapped, "What? You want to do a solo act now?" David shot back, "If I did, at least people wouldn't fall asleep." And that was it. The friendship, if there ever was one, died right there. When David died in 1991, Marvin didn't weep, but he went quiet. A close friend recalled him saying only one thing. He sang with everything he had. Sometimes that's what makes people leave too soon. Their story wasn't just two egos colliding. It was the cruel design of an industry that forced black artists to compete for one spotlight. Never enough room for two. The clash of formulas. Norman Whitfield. If David Ruffin was the storm on stage, Norman Whitfield was the storm in the studio. Whitfield, the producer who reinvented the Temptations with psychedelic soul, believed in structure, layering, formulas that guaranteed hits. Marvin? He believed in chaos, instinct, and unfiltered emotion. Whitfield would walk into the studio with a demo and say, "This is your next big hit." Marvin would cross his arms, listen, and respond softly. "I don't hear soul in it." It drove Whitfield mad. To him, Marvin was wasting potential. To Marvin, Whitfield was stripping away humanity. One saw charts and formulas, The other saw blood and prayer. They were like two charged wires, close enough to spark, but never to connect. Their arguments weren't just artistic, they were philosophical. Whitfield believed success required discipline. Marvin believed success without truth was meaningless. "He treated me like a child," Marvin once confided. "I wanted to record voices from the street, real sounds." He scoffed. "Whose reality am I supposed to sing? His or mine?" The breaking point was, what's going on? Marvin produced it himself, rejecting every Motown formula. Whitfield heard it and said, half admiring, half mocking, "You're singing like you're praying." Marvin replied, "Because I am." Whitfield couldn't follow Marvin into that storm, and Marvin refused to live in Whitfield's blueprint. They respected each other's genius, but they could never coexist. The ghost of a collaboration, Quincy Jones.
Working with a group of singers, working with large orchestras, working with small orchestras, tempos, keys.
The final name on Marvin's list wasn't a clash of tempers or egos. It was a quiet refusal. Early 1980s, Quincy Jones, the architect behind Off the Wall and soon Thriller, invited Marvin to collaborate. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Quincy envisioned polished, layered harmonies, Marvin's haunting vocals woven into a grand architecture of sound. But Marvin, he simply stood up, shook Quincy's hand, and walked away. Why? Not because he disliked Quincy, not because he doubted his genius, but because their visions of music were worlds apart. Quincy was an architect. Marvin was a storm. Quincy believed in perfection. Marvin believed in chaos. "Quincy is a genius," Marvin told a friend, "but too perfect. I don't believe in perfection. I believe in things that have to be sung before they can even be written down." Quincy later admitted, "I wanted Marvin, but Marvin didn't want producers. He was the producer." And so, the dream collaboration evaporated. No demos, no secret tapes, no second chances. Only silence, and the haunting thought of what could have been. Quincy moved on, made Thriller, and shaped pop history. Marvin retreated into his storm, producing his final works on his own terms. Two geniuses, too different to ever stand in the same room. So, what do these 5 stories tell us? Barry Gordy, Diana Ross, David Ruffin, Norman Whitfield, Quincy Jones, 5 titans of music history, and yet Marvin Gaye, the soft-spoken soul singer, couldn't stand beside them. Not because he hated them, but because to stand beside them meant losing himself. Marvin's life was a constant tug-of-war between freedom and control. He wasn't easy to work with. He wasn't easy to market. But that very difficulty gave us the Marvin Gaye we remember today. He wasn't just a Motown singer. He was a prophet of soul, unafraid to defy even the giants. In the end, Marvin's greatest legacy wasn't who he worked with, but who he refused to work with. His greatest yes to music came from his ability to say no to compromise. And maybe that's why, even today, his songs still sound like confessions whispered straight into our ears. Because Marvin Gaye never gave us what the industry wanted. He gave us what his soul needed.